Hi friends, welcome to LifeStream Live with Angie. Today we are here with Amanda Bullion, who is the educator for Jay County Purdue Extension, and she is going to be doing a presentation today about dining with diabetes. Amanda, thank you for joining me. I do appreciate it, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to you to explain a little bit about yourself and start on with the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it. I love working with LifeStream and all the services that they have to offer. So I am happy to be here today, focusing in today on diabetes and snacking. And we'll get to that a little bit later in today's program. But as Angie introduced me, I am the Health and Human Science educator in Jay County. Today's presentation is a bit of a modification from our Dining with Diabetes course, as well as a previous produced program called Defining Diabetes. I always like to start all of our presentations, especially our virtual ones, with what is Purdue Extension. Some people always ask what we are and what we do on a day-to-day basis. So our mission is to deliver practical, research-based information that transforms lives and livelihoods. We like to consider the classroom is our entire community that we serve. There are 92 different offices across the state of Indiana, so an office in every county, and each of those offices have sometimes all four, sometimes a combination of ag and natural resource educators, community development educators, 4-H and youth development educators, and our health and human science educators. So today I was invited to talk to you guys about diabetes, something that I feel really strongly about. It's something I'm very passionate about. I've watched diabetes impact a lot of people within my family. So it's something that I enjoy researching, and I hope that today you'll be able to get an idea of the basic concepts behind diabetes and what it is. Learn to identify your signs and symptoms of diabetes. We're going to talk about some of the myths that are often associated with diabetes. We're going to learn some healthier snack options for diabetes and learn why physical activity and nutrition are an important part of balancing diabetes. So why do we need to have this conversation about diabetes? There's a lot of hot topics right now in healthcare, and one of them is diabetes because more than 30 million people in America are diabetic. So that's about 10% of our population. More than 1 in 4 diabetics don't know that they actually have diabetes. Diabetes affects 1 in 4 people over the age of 65, and it's the 7th leading cause of death in the United States. As of right now, we have about 1.4 million people per year being diagnosed with diabetes. And I hear from a lot of different people. They get their diabetes diagnosis and they kind of feel alone and isolated. What do I do now? How am I supposed to manage this? There's no cure for this. So this is something that's chronic and lifelong. And the answer is you're not alone. You know, we have a huge population and a growing concern for diabetic health and diabetic awareness. So I'm hoping today that we can kind of debunk some of the myths about diabetes and put you on a path of feeling confident and comfortable and talking about your conditions with your doctor and your family and setting you up with some support. I thought this image was the best image I could find and didn't include a bunch of medical jargon. Like this, it says, what is diabetes? If you start at the top where it looks like there's a chocolate muffin, our bodies need fuel to give them the energy to keep working. And I think that's the most basic concept of why we eat food. Your body needs fuel. So we get the fuel from our food. The food we get changes into glucose, which if you are diabetic or know someone who is diabetic, I am sure you have heard the term glucose very often. Glucose is a fancy word for sugar. Okay, so glucose travels around the body, but it cannot be used as energy until it can be absorbed into our body's cells. So essentially we eat our food and it changes into sugar or glucose in our body, but our body doesn't really know how to use sugar. So what it does then is it travels to our pancreas, which is located kind of underneath and behind your stomach, and it makes it into a hormone called insulin, which if you are diabetic, know someone who's diabetic or are recently diagnosed with diabetes, you've also probably heard the word insulin very often. So insulin is a hormone that was sugar at one point in time, and it kind of acts like the key. Insulin is the key that lets the glucose enter the body. When we look at this, there are kind of two different kinds of diabetes, type 1 diabetics and type 2 diabetics. In people with diabetes, they either are type 1 and cannot make insulin, so that sugar doesn't happen because they can't make it, or type 2 diabetics where they cannot make enough insulin or they are insulin resistant. So their body, again, isn't getting the key to work and function properly. So there are two types of diabetics, two main types of diabetics. If you've been to the doctor recently, they should tell you what kind of type you are. Type 1 used to be called childhood diabetes. You might have heard of it as childhood diabetes, but it only accounts for about 5 to 10% of all diagnoses. This is when the body cannot make insulin and the immune system attacks and destroys your insulin producing cells. Again, typically diagnosed in childhood or young adulthood, but it can happen at any age. Insulin must be taken regularly. You may see people as type 1 diabetics with a monitor on their body, kind of sits on their belt. Risk factors for this include autoimmune disease, genetics, and environmental factors. Type 1, like I said, is not as common as type 2. Type 2 diabetics are 90 to 95% of all cases diagnosed. The body does not use or make insulin effectively. This can happen at any age, including childhood. However, it occurs most often in middle age or our older adults. Your largest risk factors for this include age, obesity, family history, physical inactivity, and race and ethnicity are two of your big risk factors here. So how do you know if you have diabetes? I want to make sure that I'm very clear. You cannot self-diagnose diabetes. Does need to be diagnosed with your doctor, and you need to have some very real conversations with your doctor. However, if you have some of these side effects and symptoms, don't ignore them. Go to your doctor and have an official diagnosis as often and as quickly as you can. Things to be concerned about: frequent urination, excessive thirst, unexplained weight loss, sudden vision changes, tingling or numbness in your hands or feet, feeling tired much of the time, extreme dry skin, sores that are slow to heal, especially on parts of your body, such as your hands and feet, more infections than usual, symptoms of abrupt onset. Type 1 is also common to have that nausea, vomiting, and stomach aches. But some people are completely asymptomatic and they don't know that they have diabetes until they're experiencing a related health issue. So they go into the hospital and something's happening and the doctor tests their blood glucose level and they find out that they're diabetic at that point. So these are just things that I would always be aware of. If you have several or all of these, it's time to have a conversation with your doctor, but you cannot self-diagnose with diabetes. The reason we stress to have those conversations with your doctor, that is because of the fact that uncontrolled diabetes can have a lot of severe complications. So things that can go wrong if your diabetes is out of control include nerve damage, eye damage. You can see in this picture, they have diabetic neuropathy, diabetic edema, cataracts, and glaucoma. Those are all eye conditions that are more prevalent in diabetics due to the poor circulation of blood. Heart disease, loss of limbs, again, because of blood flow, stroke, kidney issues, and more. Tooth decay is one that's on our picture, and some issues with brain function, so strokes and things like that. These are all if diabetes goes unmonitored or you're not having these conversations with your doctor. Now, I don't want to scare people who are on this call with us today or give this feeling of hopelessness. So the good news is that most complications are preventable when you use treatment and when you follow this balancing act. And we'll talk about that towards the end of our program today. Our most common diabetic treatments include insulin. So people with type 1 need to take insulin every day. And people with type 2 usually require it by monitoring when they're high and when they're low. And their doctors will prescribe when they need to take insulin and how much. Oral medications are typical for type 2 diabetics. Your home glucose monitor, you should be monitoring your blood sugar as your doctor prescribes for you to do. So that might be before a meal, after a meal, when you wake up, before you go to bed. Again, have that conversation with your doctor. It really depends where you are in that diagnosis. And then, of course, diet and exercise. Diet and exercise help bring this balancing act to diabetes. So keeping a healthy weight, having a regular diet of good foods that are nourishing for your body will actually help improve your symptoms and side effects of diabetes. Diabetes does require a comprehensive team. So you'll have quite a few doctors probably. You'll probably have doctors that monitor your diabetes and your overall kind of family doctor. You may have a doctor that specializes in your heart if you have heart problems. You may have a doctor that specializes in your kidney function if you find that your kidneys are not what's the word I'm looking for? Not functioning properly. So you might find that you have lots of doctors. The key here is to communicate with all of them and to follow their treatment plan and make sure that each doctor knows your records. They have an idea of your history, your family background. Other things that you also want to have conversations about with are monitoring your blood glucose level and bringing those numbers with you to your appointments, keeping an eye on your blood pressure, checking your microalbumin, monitoring your cholesterol, having regular exams for your feet, eyes, and dental. We also recommend in our Dining with Diabetes course that you check your feet every day on a personal level. So if you can get your foot up to your knee and get a good look at the bottoms, including toes and around the sides, that's great. If you can't, maybe invest in a good mirror and put that down so that you can see the bottom of your feet, or ask for family support. Ask for someone in your family that sees you regularly to look at your feet. And then we also want to recommend your vaccines, and then talk with your doctor about any kind of diet and exercise. If you have the opportunity to meet with a registered dietitian, one that specializes in diabetes care, we always strongly recommend that, because they can give you a good idea based on where your insulin levels are on the kind of diet that would work best for you. So debunking diabetes. So diabetes is not always 100% preventable. People will say that. Diabetes is not because someone is fat. Diabetes is not caused from eating too much sugar. Diabetes is not always controlled by diet alone. Diabetes is not recognized by appearance. Diabetes is not just avoiding sugar. It is not curable. But diabetes is not a death sentence, and it is not one size fits all. That's why the key to communicating with your doctors and your healthcare team is so important. What one doctor says needs to be communicated to the other doctor or the other physician, so that your whole team can make sure that you're receiving the best care based on your numbers, because kind of what this looks like, it's not one size fits all. It's not everybody's plan for care looks the same. So I have one more debunking, and that is, should a diabetic snack? Yes or no? What do we think here? Yes or no? Angie, what do you think?
I would say it depends on the types of snacks so that the individual is wanting to consume, and based upon their blood sugars as well, because if their blood sugars are already high, depending on what they're snacking on, could increase those levels. If their blood sugars are low, then yes, snacking would be a good thing to help get those blood sugars back up to where they need to be.
You are absolutely right. Yes, diabetics should snack. However, the choice of snack absolutely matters. So you can see in the previous picture, as delicious as some of this might look, we've got some chocolate and Snickers bars and looks like chips and pretzels and popcorn. These are not ideal options for people with diabetes. So in this photo, you can see we have fresh cut vegetables. It looks like there's some pita bread. This in the bowl, the wooden bowl is a hummus spread. In the other photo, we have almonds and blueberries and raspberries, pistachios, celery with peanut butter and some tomatoes. And it looks like some rice cakes or granola. These are much better choices for those living with diabetes. So examples of some friendly snacks, things to consider. We always want to ask ourselves these questions, even if you're not diabetic. Am I truly hungry at this point right now? Diabetics typically have a sensation to want for thirst. They have this, I'm really, really thirsty. So we always want to try to have some water or some tea or maybe some plain coffee and see if that kind of curbs that need to eat at that moment. Do I need extra calories for my physical activity? Do I need extra carbohydrates? These are some questions that you might want to ask yourselves before you dive in to snacking. If you have answered those questions honestly and you've tried maybe some water or you feel like your blood sugar is kind of taking a nosedive, you want to select snacks that help promote a good blood glucose sugar level. So we don't want to dive into the Snickers. As delicious as it might seem, that's going to make our blood sugar rise, and then we're going to crash again. Another option would be your non-starchy vegetables, so things like carrots. I personally love sugar snap peas. They're one of my favorites, but they do tend to be a little bit more starchy. But celery is a great option. Carrots are a great option. Peppers are a great option. And of course, we want them to be easy to prepare because if they are really complicated, the chances are you aren't going to make them and you're not going to eat them. We want them to be satisfying and we want them to be tasty. I found this list over 1 through 10 from the American Diabetes Association. They suggested air popped popcorn and light butter and light salt. Again, remember diabetes has a lot of complications that can happen from that, one of them being heart health. So we want to make sure that we keep our sodium levels low. Fruit with a protein. So this could be an apple with some cheese cubes. This could be a banana with some peanut butter. That would be a great option. Number 3, bean dip with a vegetable. So like a fat-free refried bean and some veggie sticks would be a great option for that. Number 4, hard-boiled eggs or any kind of egg that you're willing to eat. Hard-boiled eggs are just great because you can make so many of them at a time, keep them in your easy to peel and kind of on your way. Olives, and I put a little asterisk next to olives because I love the idea of olives. However, again, salt, lots of salt in olives. So be mindful, measure your portions. If the back of the can says 6 olives, take out 6 cans from the olives and put them on a plate. If you take the whole jar and sit down, chances are you'll eat the whole jar. Avocado is a great healthy fat. It keeps you full. If you can put avocado on a piece of whole grain toast, that would be a great alternative for snacking. Avocado on maybe some whole grain crackers. I've also seen at the grocery store, I don't know if you've seen this or not, it's called Everything But the Bagel seasoning. And it has things like sesame seeds and poppy seeds, some Himalayan salt, and you could sprinkle just a little bit of that on some avocado and I bet it would be delicious. Tuna or salmon is a great option. Fruit and yogurts, kind of like we talked about the apple, swapping that out with some yogurt. Vegetable juice, and again, watch the sodium in that and make sure that it's vegetable juice, not like a fruit concentrate, not like high C or anything that has a lot of sugar in it. And the last one, toast plus a nut butter. Start to experiment with things other than peanut butter. So maybe try almond butter or cashew butter. There's lots of different options out there in the stores right now. These are kind of making an up and trend in the diabetes world and in the health world. So you can find a lot of options that have a lot of limited sugar, limited salt, and limited processing, and they're really good, healthy option. We also want to recommend to those living with diabetes to get food inspiration and support in any way that they find beneficial. So definitely check out at the library, if you can, some diabetic cookbooks or magazines. There are tons of them out there floating around, and they're specific for diabetics. Look at websites such as the American Diabetes Association. They have a whole entire tab full of just recipes, and you can sort them out by breakfast, snacks, lunch options. Most of our local communities have a diabetes support group. Some of them are not currently meeting due to COVID practice, but some of them are meeting virtually, or they're having some kind of groups. So reach out to your local hospital, reach out to your local extension office if you're watching this in another county, because chances are there's a group that's meeting. Again, we've got our virtual groups for people living with diabetes. And if you can, make an appointment with a licensed dietitian for more help. Most insurances, from what I have been told, will provide an appointment with a dietitian after your diabetes diagnosis. And that will give you the opportunity to sit down and say, this is what I eat on a regular basis. What changes do I need to make to my diet due to my diabetes diagnosis? And at the very beginning, we talked about diabetes being a balancing act, that there's a lot of balance that happens. So you kind of think about it, you've got these 5 areas of support that you have to balance. One of them is diet. One of them is physical activity. Physical activity is really important to diabetics. It keeps your blood flow in all of your ligaments, your arms and legs. It helps stabilize mood. Some people with diabetes will tell us that they just constantly feel like their moods are up and down and up and down. They kind of feel like they're on a roller coaster. A lot of that has to do with the hormones in the body. So physical activity can kind of help level those off a little bit. It's not just for losing weight. There's a lot of other benefits to diabetics for physical activity. It comes down to balancing your medication, working with your healthcare professional, and having that family support. If you can find someone within your family that can be your accountability partner, or that will support you through your choices that you need to make through your diabetes, you'll be much more successful, and you'll feel like you have a support system that backs your choices. I always want to put this out there for anyone who might be watching. I told you at the very beginning that our presentation today is kind of a very small taste of our Dining with Diabetes course. That's considered a cooking school course that you get a little bit of education for the first hour, and in the second hour, you learn some diabetic cooking methods that really will help improve, those feelings of, well, I can't have XYZ anymore. We hear that a lot from diabetics. Well, I can't have pasta anymore. Well, that's not really true. You can. We're going to help you learn some healthier ways to cook the pasta. Or maybe you can't have it 4 or 5 times a week. Maybe you can only have it 1 time a week, or we need to balance the rest of the carbs out. Those kinds of questions that diabetics come up with that they're just unsure about. So I definitely want to encourage anyone who is thinking about, feeling overwhelmed with diabetes, I don't know what to do from this point forward, is to reach out to their extension office and ask about the Dining with Diabetes course. I think Angie and I were just talking about it before we started our call today, that has been offered in Delaware County recently, but I'm not sure of our other surrounding counties where that's being offered currently, but definitely call your extension office and ask. If there aren't questions, Angie, if you thought of anything, go ahead, you can hit me with those, but that is my email and phone number. If anyone has questions about extension or about Dining with Diabetes or diabetes questions in general, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Amanda. Excuse me. Actually, you answered all of my questions that I was going to ask you, as far as how would we, find out more information about the Dining with Diabetes. yeah, who do we contact? Where do we start with that? But it is very important, everything that you touched on, as far as, knowing what type of diabetes you're diagnosed with, and, how to start, with treating your diabetes condition. And it's very important for everyone to understand, though, that, checking your diabetes, your blood sugars, and monitoring those and keeping a very close communication with your doctor is very important. So that way, you can keep your diabetes issue managed and under control as much as possible. So no, you definitely touched on everything. So yeah, thank
That's
you.
good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I will go ahead and stop sharing. And like I said, don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll definitely get you to that person. I always like to say I'm not a doctor. I'm not a dietitian. I've just lived and watched this as I've watched my dad go through diabetes his whole life. And just, it's always been one thing that's important to me. I've watched him struggle because 25 years ago, there was not this kind of support or knowledge really about diabetes. The diabetes
Exactly.
a lot.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more on the market too. I remember my mom saying, when you'd go to the grocery store, you had Sweet and Low. That was it. That's all
Exactly.
you had, the big packets.
That's
And
right.
you can go down the baking aisle, and not only are there sugar-free baking mixes already there, you have maybe 5 or 6 different sugar substitutes that are all different. And that's one thing that we do talk about in our Fighting with Diabetes course is, okay, so there are, 6 or 7 major sugar substitutes on the market. What do I do with those? Because some of them you really shouldn't bake with.
Exactly. Right. And that,
make a good
that was one
product.
of those things. Yeah. Because, and even with some of the fruits, yes, fruits are healthy, but you also have to be, open-minded, though, that some of those fruits have a higher, sugar content in them. So, it's all about eating in moderation and knowing, though, what your blood sugars are. So that way you can maybe have, that higher, sugar content snack or something, so it just
Absolutely.
depends, unfortunately, on the individual and how the blood sugars are going for them. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you again, Amanda. I do appreciate it. And hopefully in the near future, we can definitely partner with Jay County again for some other presentations.
Sounds great. I look forward to hearing from you guys soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, Amanda.